Take your hands off that door right now." The man at the wheel of the silver sedan didn't move. He sat there, both hands on the steering wheel 10 and 2 like he'd been taught decades ago and never forgot. The cop yanked the door open anyway. The interior light came on, and for 1 second the cop saw the man's face. And something in that face made him pause. Not recognition. Not yet. Just a flicker, the way a memory stirs before it wakes up. "Sir, I'm just trying to help you." Cop grabbed him by the arm, out of the car. Now, the man got out slowly, calmly, the way you move when you've decided not to fight. He was wearing a worn leather jacket, jeans, boots that had seen better days. He looked like a roadie, a trucker, a guy who fixed motorcycles for a living. Nothing about him said movie star. Nothing about him said anything at all except tired. The cop shoved him against the side of the car, patted him down, found the badge in the inner pocket of the jacket. A VIP badge. A lanyard with a laminated pass, gold lettering, a studio logo, the words "All Access" printed across the top. The cop held it up to the light and laughed. "Oh, this is rich." He turned the badge so the small crowd that had gathered at the gas station could see it. "Y'all see this? This guy thinks he's somebody." He shook his head, walked to the trash can by the pumps and dropped the badge in. It hit the metal with a dull clang. The sound carried across the parking lot like a gunshot. "That's where this belongs," the cop said, "just like you." The man at the car didn't move, he didn't flinch, he didn't shout. He looked at the trash can, at his badge sitting on top of crumpled napkins, and he said 5 words, quiet, calm, like a fact carved in stone. "You are going to regret this." The cop laughed, that same ugly laugh. But 5 minutes later, that cop was on his knees begging. And the man he was begging to wasn't a roadie, wasn't a trucker, wasn't a nobody. He was the most famous actor on the planet. And the cop had just thrown his badge in the trash because he couldn't imagine a man like that being somebody. So, drop a comment right now, smash that like, and let me take you back to where it all began. But before we get to that part, let me take you back to the beginning, because this story doesn't start at a trash can. It starts with a man, a motorcycle, and a small town in the middle of nowhere that had no idea what was about to walk into it. It was a Thursday afternoon in October, and the town of Millbrook, Tennessee, was doing what Millbrook always did on a Thursday afternoon, which was absolutely nothing. Population 4,300. A single main street with a diner, a hardware store, a church with a cracked bell, and one gas station that doubled as the town's unofficial gathering place. The kind of place where the high school football score was still the headline at the diner 40 years after the team stopped winning. The kind of place where everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew everybody's business. And if you were a stranger, you were a story before you'd even finished your coffee. And on this particular Thursday, a stranger was coming. He was coming down Route 41 on a motorcycle, an old black bike that had been ridden hard and put away wet 1,000 times. The man on it wore a worn leather jacket, jeans, boots. His hair was long, his beard was scruffy, and if you passed him on the road, you would have looked right through him. That was the point. That was always the point. The man on the motorcycle was Keanu Reeves, and he was doing what he did better than almost anyone alive, which was being the most famous person in the world while looking like the least famous person in the world. He'd flown into Nashville that morning quietly, no entourage, no handlers, no the way he always traveled. A friend of his from the old days, a stuntman named Billy Ray who'd worked with him on a film 30 years ago, had retired to a farm 20 miles outside Millbrook. Billy Ray was dying. Not fast, but not slow either. The kind of dying that gives you time to think about everything you did and everything you didn't. Keanu had known Billy Ray for 30 years. Billy Ray had taught him how to fall off a horse without breaking his neck, how to take a punch on camera that looked real but didn't hurt, how to be a movie star without letting it turn you into an asshole. And now Billy Ray was in a hospital bed in a county that didn't have a single movie theater, and Keanu was on a motorcycle he'd rented from a shop in Nashville, riding 2 hours into the hills to say goodbye. That's who he was. That's who he'd always been. The most famous man in the world, riding alone down a back road to visit a dying friend because nobody else was going to do it and because that's what you do for the people who made you. He'd stopped at the gas station on Route 41 to fill up and grab a bottle of water. The station was busy for a Thursday. A couple of trucks, a minivan with a family, an old man in a baseball cap sitting on a bench with a styrofoam cup. Keanu pulled in, parked the bike at the pump, and swung his leg off. He stretched his back. 2 hours of riding had stiffened his shoulders. He pulled off his helmet, ran a hand through his hair, and walked into the store. Nobody recognized him. Nobody ever did. That was the miracle of being Keanu Reeves. He was famous in the way that water is wet, in the way that gravity is heavy, in the way that you don't notice the air you're breathing until someone points it out. And standing in a gas station in Millbrook, Tennessee, in a leather jacket and jeans, he looked like exactly what he was pretending to be, a guy who rode motorcycles for a living and didn't have anywhere to be until tomorrow. He paid for his water and a pack of gum, thanked the kid behind the counter, and walked back out to his bike. He didn't notice the patrol car parked at the far end of the lot. Didn't see the officer sitting inside, watching him through the windshield. He had no idea that the next 10 minutes were about to change everything, for him, for that officer, and for a town that had been looking the other way for a very long time. Inside the patrol car, Officer Raylan Cade had been watching the biker since the moment he pulled in. He sat behind the wheel, engine idling, a half-eaten sandwich going stale in the passenger seat. His partner, a rookie named Tommy Voss, 3 weeks on the job, was in the passenger seat scrolling through his phone. Cade didn't blink. His eyes stayed locked on the man at the pump. White guy, older, leather jacket, out-of-state plates on the bike, alone. Something in his chest tightened. Not suspicion. Something older. Something uglier. See, Cade had a history with this kind of moment. And to understand what happens next, you need to understand what happened 20 years ago. His father, Harlan Cade, had been a deputy in this same county. Same roads, same uniform, same badge. Harlan was old school, the kind of cop who believed that policing meant keeping certain people in line, and that the badge gave him the right to decide who those people were. And for most of his career, nobody questioned him, until one day a traveler passing through filed a complaint. The complaint went up the chain. Internal Affairs tried to bury it, but someone sent a copy to the state attorney general's office. An investigation opened. Harlan was suspended, then fired. The stress of it, the hearings, the public shame, the loss of the only identity he'd ever known, ate him alive. 6 months after his termination, Harlan Cade died of a heart attack in his living room. He was 54. Raylan was 26 when they buried his father. He stood at the graveside in his own uniform and made a promise he never said out loud but carried every single day since. No outsider would ever make his family feel small again. In Raylan Cade's mind, an outsider had destroyed his father and the system had helped them do it. He never questioned that. Not once. And now here was another one standing at a gas pump in his county on his roads like he had every right to be there. His knuckles went white on the steering wheel. "Stay here," he told Voss. "What's up?" Voss looked up from his phone. "Just stay here." Cade stepped out, adjusted his belt, straightened his sunglasses, and walked toward the pump like a man who owned every square inch of that parking lot. Keanu had his back to him. The pump clicked off. Tank was full. He hung the nozzle back and reached for his wallet. "Sir." He turned around, a cop, close, too close. One hand on his belt, the other pointing at him. "I need to see some ID. License and registration, now." Keanu looked at him, then looked around the parking lot, families at other pumps, a teenager wiping a windshield, a man walking out of the convenience store with a bag of chips, everyone going about their Thursday. "Of course, officer," he said. His voice was calm. "Can I ask what this is about?" Cade didn't answer the question. Instead, he raised his voice, loud enough for the people at the next pump to hear. "You don't look like you're from around here. What's a man like you doing riding through my county on a Thursday afternoon?" The words landed like a slap. A man filling up his truck 2 pumps over turned his head. A woman in a sundress froze with her hand on her gas cap. A little boy tugged his mother's sleeve and asked why the policeman was yelling. Keanu felt his stomach drop, but his face didn't change. He'd learned a long time ago that showing a reaction to a cop like this was a luxury he couldn't afford. "I'm just passing through, sir. My license is in my jacket. May I reach for it?" He moved slowly, unzipped his jacket, pulled out his wallet, and handed over his driver's license. 2 fingers, arm extended. The way his mother taught him when he was 16. Never make a cop reach for anything. Cade snatched it, studied it like he was looking for a reason. Any reason. Keanu Reeves, he read aloud. Los Angeles address. He looked up. Long way from home, Keanu. What kind of work brings you all the way out here? Just visiting a friend, sir. Visiting a friend. Cade repeated it like it tasted bad. What friend? I'd rather not get into the details, officer. Is there a problem with my vehicle? Cade tilted his head. That answer bothered him. People in his county didn't dodge questions. They answered. They nodded. They said yes, sir, and no, sir, and thank you for keeping us safe. This man was doing none of those things. He turned to look at the people around them, more eyes on him now. A couple had stopped loading groceries into their trunk. A trucker leaned against his cab, arms crossed, watching. Two teenage girls near the air pump had their phones halfway up, not quite recording, but ready. Cade didn't care. He liked the audience, always had. He raised his voice again, loud, performative, like he was putting on a show for the whole parking lot. You know, every time I see somebody I don't recognize rolling through this area, there's a problem. Every single time. It's like clockwork, never fails. He looked around at the other customers, shrugged his shoulders like he was sharing a private joke. Am I wrong? Y'all know I'm not wrong. Nobody laughed. A few people looked at the ground, but nobody said anything either. Nobody ever did. Cade turned back to Keanu, looked him up and down slow, head to toe. You running from something? Got a warrant out there I should know about? No, sir. No warrants. You sure about that? Because something about you just doesn't sit right with me. Keanu stood perfectly still, hands visible, shoulders straight. He'd been in this position before, more times than he could count. Not as a movie star. As a man. A man who'd spent his whole life looking like he didn't belong in rooms he'd actually been invited to. So he did what he'd always done. He stayed calm, he stayed polite, and he asked the only question that mattered. Officer, I've shown you my ID. I've answered your questions. I'm happy to cooperate, but I'd like to know, am I being detained or am I free to go? The air between them shifted. Cade's jaw clenched. His hand drifted to his belt, not toward his weapon, but toward his cuffs. The reflex of a man who wasn't used to hearing that question. He folded the license between his fingers and tapped it against his palm. Slow, deliberate, each tap a little louder than the last. You're free to go when I say you're free to go. That's how this works in my county. He stepped closer, close enough that Keanu could smell the stale coffee on his breath, close enough that the people watching couldn't pretend they didn't see. He leaned in, voice just low enough that only Keanu could hear. I'm going to find something. I always do. And when I do, you're going to wish you never set foot in this county. Keanu's heart was hammering. He could feel it in his ears and his wrists, behind his eyes. But he kept his breathing even, kept his hands still, kept his face like stone. One flinch, one wrong word, one flash of anger, and this man would have exactly the excuse he wanted. He didn't step back. He held Cade's gaze, steady, unblinking. And something about that, about the fact that this man was not afraid of him, made Cade angrier than anything he could have said. Inside the patrol car, Voss was watching everything through the windshield. His hand moved to his chest. He reached up and clicked on his body camera. The small red light blinked to life. He didn't know exactly why he did it right then. Instinct, maybe. Or maybe the voice in the back of his head, the one they hadn't trained out of him yet, was telling him that something about this stop was wrong. 3 weeks on the job. Knew enough to still have that voice. Knew enough to still listen to it. Back at the parking lot, the gas station hummed with that terrible quiet. The kind that settles over a place when everyone can feel something ugly building, but nobody knows how to make it stop. A woman in a minivan pulled her kids a little closer. An old man shook his head and walked away. The two teenage girls had their phones all the way up now, recording. And Cade standing there with Keanu's license in his fist, jaw tight, sunglasses hiding whatever churned behind his eyes. Cade was just getting started. Cade turned back toward the motorcycle. He walked around to the side, opened the saddlebag like he owned it. Sir, what are you doing? I'm conducting a search. I do not consent to a search of my vehicle. Keanu said it clearly, loud enough for the people around them to hear, loud enough that it would be picked up by any camera rolling. A man at the next pump looked over. A woman carrying a case of water stopped walking. Cade didn't even glance at him. Yeah, well, I can smell marijuana coming from this vehicle. That gives me probable cause, so your consent doesn't mean a damn thing. There is no marijuana in my vehicle. I said I smell it. That's enough. Step back. There was no marijuana. There had never been marijuana. The motorcycle was a rental he'd picked up that morning. It smelled like oil and highway and nothing else. But that didn't matter. Cade had said the magic words, I smell marijuana. And in his county, on his roads, that was all it ever took. He reached into the saddlebag and started pulling things out. A spare jacket came first. He tossed it onto the pavement. Then a pair of gloves. Then a small duffel which he unzipped and dumped upside down. A change of clothes spilled across the dirty lot. A shirt, a pair of socks, a paperback book, a worn copy with the spine cracked in half. Keanu watched his things scatter across the concrete in front of strangers, in front of families, in front of children who were watching from car windows with wide eyes. Something about that, about his private things lying in the dirt, hit harder than all the yelling. A woman at pump 2 put her hand over her mouth. The trucker uncrossed his arms and took his phone out. The teenage girls were already recording. Cade kept going. Under the seat, in the tool compartment, everywhere. He searched like a man looking for something specific, but they both knew he wasn't. He was looking for a reason to exist in this moment, a reason to keep going, a reason to prove to himself and everyone watching that he was right about this man, that he was always right about people who didn't belong here. Then he found it. Tucked in the inner pocket of the leather jacket which Cade had tossed aside earlier was a lanyard, a VIP badge. A laminated pass with gold lettering, a studio logo, the words All Access printed across the top and a name underneath. Keanu Reeves. Cade picked it up, held it to the light, and he laughed, not a nervous laugh, not a confused laugh. A real from-the-gut laugh, the kind that comes from a place of total certainty that the world is exactly the way you think it is. Oh, this is rich. He held the badge up high, turned it so the whole parking lot could see. Y'all see this. This guy thinks he's somebody. Looked back at Keanu. The grin was ugly. A man like you with a VIP badge, come on now. The only place that happens is on TV. This is the fakest damn thing I've ever held in my life. Keanu's hands were trembling at his sides, not from fear, from something deeper, something he had to hold down with everything he had. He could feel the eyes of every person in that parking lot on him, the pity, the horror, the helplessness. It burned worse than anything Cade had said. Officer, that badge is real. I am asking you to call your station. Run the badge number. It will take 2 minutes. Measured, controlled, every word placed like a brick. Cade looked at him like he'd told a joke that wasn't funny. You want me to waste my time calling in a toy badge some nobody bought off the internet? He shook his head. I don't think so, sweetheart. He walked to the trash can, the big metal one by the pumps, overflowing with napkins and soda cups. He held the badge up one more time, high so everyone in that lot could see it, and dropped it in. The leather lanyard hit the metal with a dull clang. The sound carried across the parking lot like a gunshot. That's where this belongs, Cade said. He turned to Keanu. Right there in the trash, just like you don't belong here. The gas station had gone completely silent. No pumps clicking. No engines starting. Just the hum of the overhead lights and the distant rush of traffic on Route 41. Keanu stood there looking at the trash can, his credentials, the pass that opened every door in Hollywood, sitting on top of crumpled napkins and empty coffee cups. 30 years of work thrown away in 3 seconds by a man who couldn't imagine a man like him earning them. His jaw tightened. His eyes burned, but he didn't cry. He didn't scream. He looked straight at Cade. You are making a mistake you cannot take back. Call your station. Verify the badge. I'm asking you one last time. Cade smirked. Or what? Inside the patrol car, Voss had heard every word. His body camera was still recording, the red light steady on his chest. His palms were slick against the dashboard. He looked at the badge in the trash can. He looked at the man standing by the pumps, calm, still, dignified. While his senior officer tore him apart in front of 30 people, something in his gut told him this was wrong. Wrong not like a bad judgment call. Wrong like the kind of wrong that ends careers, that ends up on the news, that follows you for the rest of your life. He was 3 weeks into this job. He didn't have the authority to override Cade, didn't have the seniority to challenge him, but he had a radio and he knew the procedure. When someone claims to be somebody, you verify. You don't throw the badge in the garbage and laugh about it. Voss picked up the radio. His hand was shaking. He pressed the button and spoke quietly, low enough that Cade wouldn't hear from outside. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7 requesting a verification on a VIP badge. Studio pass. Name on the badge is Keanu Reeves." He read off the name and the badge number he'd memorized when Cade held it up for the crowd. Then he waited, staring through the windshield, watching Cade pace back and forth in front of the man, praying he was wrong about what he thought was about to happen. He wasn't wrong. Back outside, Cade was done waiting too, but not for a radio call. He turned back to Keanu. His face had changed. The smirk was gone. What replaced it was something harder, colder, something decided. "All right, I've heard enough of this. You're carrying a fake badge. You're refusing to cooperate and you're wasting my Thursday afternoon. I'm placing you under arrest for impersonation. I have cooperated with everything. You've turned around. Hands behind your back. Officer, please just call it in." I said turn around. He didn't turn around. He stood facing him, eyes locked. Cade grabbed his arm hard, fingers digging into his skin. He spun him around and slammed him forward onto the hood of the patrol car. The metal was hot from the October sun. Keanu felt it sear through his jacket, against his chest, against his cheek. His face pressed against the hood, his arms yanked behind his back. The steel of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Cold, tight, biting into his skin. A woman in the parking lot gasped. Someone yelled out, "Hey, come on, man," but nobody stepped forward. The old man who'd been walking away turned back around, his face white. A child started crying in a minivan. Cade leaned down close to his ear. His breath was hot against his neck. "This is what happens to any stranger who comes to my county pretending to be something he's not. This is how it ends for people like you." He stood up and looked around the parking lot. Dozens of phones. Every single one recording. Cade looked right into the nearest camera and shrugged. "Just doing my job, folks. Nothing to see here." Keanu lay still on the hood, the heat soaking through his clothes, the cuffs pulling his shoulders back, his cheek pressed against grit and dust and sun-baked metal. The world reduced to the sound of his own breathing. Controlled, even, steady. The only thing he could still control in this moment. He turned his head just enough to look at Cade and he said 5 words. Quiet. Calm. Like a fact carved in stone. "You are going to regret this." Cade laughed. That same ugly laugh. But inside the patrol car, the radio crackled to life, and the voice on the other end was about to change everything. The radio crackled inside the patrol car. Voss lunged for it. "Unit 7 badge confirmed. The pass is valid and active, registered to Keanu Reeves. The name on the badge is real." Voss stared at the dashboard. Then he looked through the windshield at the man lying face down on the hood of his patrol car, handcuffed behind his back. Keanu Reeves, the most famous actor in the world. His senior officer had just thrown his badge in the trash. Voss grabbed the radio again, his voice cracked. "Dispatch, patch me through to Sheriff Boone now. Emergency." It took 45 seconds, the longest 45 seconds of Tommy Voss's life. Outside, Cade was leaning against the patrol car, arms crossed, looking satisfied with himself. Keanu hadn't moved. His cheek still pressed against the hot metal, his breathing still even. Then Boone's voice came through, not on Voss's channel, on Cade's. "Officer Cade, this is Sheriff Boone. You will cease all activity immediately. Do you copy?" Voice boomed out of the radio, clipped to Cade's belt. Loud, clear, echoing across the parking lot. Every phone recording picked it up. The crowd went still. Cade froze. His hand went to the radio. "Sheriff, I've got a situation here. A man with a fake badge. That badge is real, Cade. That man is Keanu Reeves. He is the biggest movie star in the world, and he is standing in my county in front of 30 witnesses with your handcuffs on his wrists. Do you understand what I am telling you?" Dead silence. The whole parking lot, the traffic on Route 41, everything stopped. Cade's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not possible. There's no way. Shut your mouth. Remove the handcuffs. Do not speak to him. Do not touch him. Do not move from that spot. I am on my way." The radio went dead. Cade stood there. His face had lost all color. The sunglasses that had made him look untouchable 5 minutes ago now looked like a mask with nothing behind it. He looked around the parking lot. Every phone still up. Every lens pointed at him. The trucker, The teenage girls, the woman with the toddler, the old man who'd come back, all watching, all recording. Not a single person looked away. His hands were shaking as he reached for his keys. He fumbled with the handcuff key, dropped it on the pavement, picked it up, dropped it again. The metal key scraped against the cuffs before finally catching. The click of the cuffs releasing was the loudest sound in that parking lot. Keanu stood up slowly, rolled his shoulders back, straightened his jacket, touched the spot on his cheek where the hot metal had pressed a red mark into his skin. He didn't rub it, he just touched it like he was cataloging evidence, filing it away for what came next. He didn't say a word. He turned and looked at Cade, and the look on his face said more than any sentence could. It wasn't anger, it wasn't triumph. It was something quieter than both. Cade couldn't meet his eyes. 5 minutes later, a black SUV pulled into the lot. Sheriff Walt Boone stepped out. His face looked like a man who'd aged 10 years on the drive over. He walked straight to Keanu, asked to see his identification. Keanu handed him his driver's license, the one Cade had snatched from him earlier. Boone examined it, nodded, a short, grim nod. He turned to Cade, "Get the badge out of the trash." Cade didn't move. Now, Officer Cade walked to the trash can, the same one he'd strutted to minutes ago with a grin on his face. He reached in past the napkins and soda cups and cigarette butts. His hand came out holding the lanyard, smudged, dirty, stained with coffee. He wiped it on his uniform shirt, hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. Boone took it from him, examined it, handed it back to Keanu. Keanu took it without a word, looked at the scuffs, the stains, put it in his pocket. Boone turned back to Cade. "Your weapon." Cade unholstered his pistol and handed it over. "Your badge." He unpinned his badge from his chest. The pin left a small hole in his shirt. "Your keys." The keychain jingled in the silence as Cade handed it over. Boone took all three, looked at Cade the way you look at something you're about to throw away. "You're done." Cade's legs buckled. He dropped to his knees on the concrete, right where minutes ago he had shoved a man's face into the hood of his car because of the way he looked. "Please," he said, barely a whisper. "Please, sir, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Can we talk about this?" Keanu looked down at him, at this man on his knees, the man who had called him a liar, thrown his badge in the garbage, slammed his face into hot metal, and told him he didn't belong, all because of the way he looked. He was quiet for a long moment. The parking lot held its breath. Then he spoke. "I don't need your apology, officer. I need you to understand something." Cade looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. And Keanu said the words that would follow Cade for the rest of his life. "I've been on my knees before. I've lost everything. I know what it feels like to have nothing. And I still never treated another human being the way you just treated me. That badge in the trash, it was never about the badge. It was about you deciding who I am before you ever spoke to me. And that's not something an apology fixes. That's something you have to live with." He turned and walked back to his motorcycle, stepped over his belongings still scattered across the pavement, didn't look back. Cade stayed on his knees. The phones kept recording. The gas station didn't go back to normal, not that afternoon, maybe not ever. Boone stood in the middle of the parking lot looking at the mess Cade had made. Keanu's belongings still scattered across the concrete. Clothes, a cracked paperback, a spare jacket, the trash can with its lid half open. He turned to Cade, who was still on his knees. "Get up." Cade got to his feet slowly. His uniform was wrinkled at the knees, smudged with parking lot dirt. "Sheriff, listen to me. I was just doing my job. I had probable cause. You smelled nothing. That motorcycle is a day-old rental." He was acting suspicious. He was pumping gas. "Cade, anybody could have made this mistake. You threw a VIP badge in the trash. You handcuffed the most famous actor in the world and slammed his face into the hood of your car in front of 30 witnesses on camera. That is not a mistake. That is the end of your career." Each excuse was weaker than the one before. And each time Boone shut him down, Cade's voice got smaller. Boone's fury was the controlled kind. The kind that comes from a man who knows his entire department is about to be on the national news for all the wrong reasons. Boone called for a second unit, had Cade placed in the back seat. Not in handcuffs, not yet, but behind the cage partition all the same. The door closed with a solid thunk. Cade sat there staring at his hands, the same hands that had thrown a badge into the trash and shoved a man's face into hot metal, now useless in his lap. Boone walked over to Voss. The kid was standing by the patrol car, body camera still running, looking like he might throw up. Tell me everything. Voss did the stop, the search, the badge, the trash can, every word Cade said, and then something Boone wasn't expecting. This isn't the first time, sir. Boone went still. Cade does this, not this bad, but he targets outsiders every shift. He talks about it in the car when the camera's off. Uses words I'm not going to repeat. He brags about it. Says nobody's going to stop him because internal affairs is, his words, a joke. 3 weeks of silence pouring out in 60 seconds. Voss's voice was shaking, but he didn't stop. Boone listened without interrupting. When Voss finished, the sheriff stared at the ground for a long time. Then he nodded once and walked away. Across the lot, Keanu was on his phone. He'd walked back to his motorcycle, sat on the seat with the helmet in his lap, and called the one person he called when the world got loud. Sister Kim, she picked up on the first ring. Keanu, are you okay? And for the first time that afternoon, the first time through all of it, his voice broke. I'm okay. A breath that shuddered on the way out. He threw my badge in the trash, put me in handcuffs in front of everyone, because of you know why. He pressed his fingers against the red mark on his cheek, still warm. But I'm okay. And I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen to someone who doesn't have a name to fall back on. He hung up. Sat for a minute, then got up and walked back to Boone. Sheriff, I want to be clear. I am declining your department's internal review. This is going to the state attorney general, and it's going to the press. Not because I want revenge, because I want every person in this county to know that this is not how you treat a stranger. Boone didn't argue. He didn't try to negotiate. He just nodded. He'd probably always known. He just never thought the bill would come due at a gas station on a Thursday afternoon. Keanu walked back to his motorcycle, knelt on the concrete, and started picking up his things one by one. The jacket, the gloves, the cracked paperback. A stranger, the woman with the toddler, came over and helped without saying a word. Then the old man. Then one of the teenage girls. Nobody spoke. They just helped. When everything was back on the bike, Keanu closed the saddlebag, put on his helmet, and started the engine. He rode away slowly. In his rearview mirror, the gas station got smaller. He didn't look back. The video hit the internet before Keanu even made it to Billy Ray's farm. One of the teenage girls at the gas station uploaded her footage that same afternoon. 45 seconds of shaky phone video. A cop holding a VIP badge up to a crowd, laughing, dropping it into a trash can, slamming a man face down onto the hood of a patrol car. The audio was scratchy, but you could hear every word. A man like you with a VIP badge. Come on. The only place that happens is on TV. By Thursday evening, the clip had 500,000 views. By Friday morning, 5 million. By Saturday, it was everywhere. Cable news, network morning shows, late-night monologues, the front page of every major newspaper in the country. The image of a cop tossing a man's badge into a gas station trash can become a symbol overnight. And when people realized who the man was, the internet broke. Keanu Reeves, the guy who gave away millions of his own salary to the crew on his movies. The guy who rides the subway in New York and gives up his seat to strangers. The guy who sat on a park bench eating a sandwich alone and somehow became the most beloved man on the planet. The guy who, by every account, had never been anything but kind to everyone he ever met. And a small-town cop had thrown his badge in the trash and slammed his face into a hood because he couldn't imagine a man like that being somebody. Comment sections exploded. Legal analysts broke down the charges Cade was facing. Civil rights organizations issued statements. Former prosecutors went on television and said what everyone was already thinking. This wasn't just misconduct. This was a crime caught on camera from multiple angles, and then the body camera footage dropped. Voss's footage was released through official channels. It wasn't shaky. It wasn't 45 seconds. It was the full encounter from start to finish. Every word, every action. Every moment captured in high definition from a camera mounted on the chest of a 22-year-old rookie who'd had the instinct to press record when his gut told him something was wrong. The body cam was worse than the phone video because it captured things no bystander could. The tone of Cade's voice when he told Keanu he didn't belong. The sound of his belongings hitting the concrete one by one. The dull clang of the badge hitting the inside of the trash can. The click of the handcuffs. The quiet, controlled sound of Keanu's breathing as his cheek was pressed against hot metal. And it captured the moment that became the headline of every article written about this case. Cade's voice on the radio arguing with his own sheriff, saying the words that would follow him for the rest of his life. There's no way. He never finished the sentence. He didn't need to. Everyone heard enough. The state attorney general opened a formal investigation within 72 hours. The scope went far beyond the gas station incident. This was now a pattern and practice investigation into the entire Millbrook County Sheriff's Office. And the data told a story nobody could argue with. Raylan Cade's stop records over 10 years showed that a staggering percentage of his discretionary traffic stops targeted outsiders, travelers, people passing through, in a county where outsiders made up a tiny fraction of the traffic on Route 41. 14 formal complaints had been filed against him over the course of his career, every single one dismissed by the department's Internal Affairs Unit. Not a single sustained finding. Not one. Not in a decade. 2 additional deputies were placed on administrative leave pending review of their own stop records. The internal affairs process itself was placed under investigation. Sheriff Boone held a press conference. He stood behind a podium with the county seal and tried to frame Cade as a lone bad actor, a single rotten apple, an isolated incident that didn't reflect the values of the department. The data said otherwise. The system didn't fail because of one man. One man thrived because the system was built to let him. And Keanu Reeves, the man at the center of it all, did something that surprised everyone. He didn't give interviews. He didn't appear on television. He didn't write op-eds or give speeches. His silence was deliberate. He wasn't interested in being a story. He was interested in being a lesson. The only statement he ever made was a single post on social media 4 days after the video went viral. It didn't mention Cade by name. It didn't mention the gas station. It didn't mention the badge or the trash can or the handcuffs. It was a picture of the red mark on his cheek, still faint, and a caption that said simply, "Be kind." Even when they aren't, especially when they aren't. The post got more likes than anything he'd ever shared, and underneath it in the comments people wrote their own stories. Stories about being pulled over for no reason. Stories about being followed in stores. Stories about being told they didn't belong. Millions of them. The comment section became a wall of testimony, and that, more than any interview, was the thing that changed the conversation. Because it turned one cop's mistake into a mirror held up to the whole country. The criminal charges came down 6 weeks after the gas station. Count 1. Deprivation of rights under color of law. Count 2. Destruction of property, the badge that was thrown in the trash. Count 3. Filing a false report, the fabricated marijuana smell that never existed on a day-old rental motorcycle. Cade was arrested at his home on a Tuesday morning, processed at the county courthouse. Bail was set and posted. He walked out the front door into a wall of cameras and said nothing. His attorney declined to comment. The trial began 4 months later, county courthouse. The prosecution's case was built on 3 pillars: the body camera footage, Tommy Voss's testimony, and 10 years of stop data that painted a picture no defense attorney could erase. The body cam footage was played in full for the jury, 12 minutes. The courtroom was silent the entire time. When the badge hit the trash can, leather against metal, that dull clang, a juror in the front row closed her eyes. Another wiped his face with the back of his hand. A third stared straight at Cade. And then came the moment nobody expected. The prosecution called its final witness. The courtroom doors opened and Keanu Reeves walked in. No entourage, no handlers, just him in a dark jacket walking to the stand like he was walking to a gas station pump. The gallery went quiet. The judge looked at him. The jury looked at him. Cade looked at him. Keanu took the oath, sat down, and answered every question in the same measured voice he'd used at the gas station. Controlled, precise, unshakable. When the defense attorney tried to argue that CDE had made a reasonable error in judgment, Keanu looked at him and said, "An honest mistake is pulling someone over for a broken taillight. Throwing a badge in the trash because you decided the person holding it doesn't matter is not a mistake. It's a choice. The courtroom was silent. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty, all counts. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. The judge noted the severity of the conduct, the public nature of the humiliation, and the decade-long pattern of abuse that had gone unchecked. 18 months in county jail, 3 years of probation, lifetime ban from law enforcement, permanent revocation of his certification. Meaning Raylan Cade would never wear a badge again. Not in Tennessee. Not anywhere. The Millbrook County Sheriff's Office was placed under a state consent decree. The terms included an independent monitor, mandatory bias training, revised stop and search policies, and the establishment of a civilian review board. For the first time in the department's history, residents of Millbrook County had a formal, independent mechanism to hold their police accountable. The system that protected Raylan Cade for 11 years was finally being taken apart, not from the inside. From the outside, by the man whose badge he threw in the trash. But here's the part of the story that didn't make the news, the part that tells you who Keanu Reeves actually is. Because after the verdict, after the cameras left, after the town went back to being a town, he did something that nobody asked him to do. He went back to Billy Ray's farm. He'd never left. The whole time the world was screaming about him, he was sitting in a hospital room in a county that didn't have a single movie theater, holding the hand of a dying stuntman who taught him how to fall. He stayed for 3 weeks. He slept in a chair by the bed. He read to Billy Ray when Billy Ray couldn't sleep. He told him stories from the old days, about the movie where the horse threw him, about the fight scene that took 40 takes, about the time the director screamed at everyone and Billy Ray walked off set and came back with 2 sandwiches and said, "Nobody works hungry." Billy Ray died on a Sunday morning with Keanu holding his hand. And after the funeral, after the small service in the church with the cracked bell, Keanu did one more thing. He went back to the gas station on Route 41. The pump still worked. The trash can was still by the entrance. But taped to the convenience store window put up by the owner, not by anyone official, was a printed screenshot of the moment Keanu stood up from the hood of that patrol car, shoulders back, jacket straightened, red mark on his cheek, eyes straight ahead. Underneath it, someone had written in marker, "He didn't belong here. He belonged more than any of them." Nobody took it down. Keanu stood in front of that window for a long time. Then he went inside, bought a bottle of water and a pack of gum, thanked the kid behind the counter, and walked out. The kid recognized him this time. His hands were shaking as he took the money. Keanu smiled at him. "It's okay," he said. "Have a good day." And he rode away. He never talked about the gas station again. He never mentioned Cade's name in public. He never used the incident for a movie or a book or a speech or a cause. He just went back to being who he'd always been. The most famous man in the world, riding alone down a back road, on his way to somewhere he was needed. And that, more than the verdict, more than the consent decree, more than the millions of views, that was the real ending of the story. Tommy Voss cooperated fully with investigators throughout the trial. He was not charged. After the verdict, he resigned from the sheriff's office voluntarily and enrolled in a criminal justice reform program at a Tennessee university. He didn't call himself a hero. He called himself a person who got lucky enough to press record at the right time and wished he'd spoken up sooner. Raylan Cade served his 18 months at a county facility. His appeal was denied. Court records showed his wife filed for divorce 3 months after the conviction. He was not a monster in a movie. He was a man who had been given power, told he was right, and never once held accountable until the day he met someone the system couldn't ignore. And Keanu Reeves, the man at the center of it all, went back to his life. He made movies. He rode motorcycles. He gave away money to people who needed it. He sat on park benches and ate sandwiches alone. He was kind. Was always kind. Because that's who he was before the gas station, and that's who he was after. The gas station didn't change him. It changed everyone else. And maybe that's the real point of this whole story. This story is fiction. But the dynamic at its center, a person treated as less than, as suspicious, as worthless simply because of the way they look, is documented in case after case, department after department, coast to coast. The names change. The roads change. The outcome almost never does. The only thing fictional here is the badge. The feeling is real for millions of people every single day. So here's my question, and I genuinely want to hear your answer in the comments. If that man at the gas station hadn't been Keanu Reeves, if he'd just been a trucker, a teacher, a nurse, a dad riding home to his kids, do you think this story would have ended the same way? Drop your answer below. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if this is your first time here, hit subscribe because we tell the stories that need telling. Yeah, so the real lesson here, respect costs you nothing. But disrespect, that bill always comes due. You never, and I mean never, know who's standing in front of you. Treat people like people, period. That's it. That's the whole thing. But the story didn't end there. You think it did. You think the verdict, the consent decree, the millions of views, that was the ending. But the real ending came 6 months later on a cold Tuesday in March in a town 40 miles from the gas station. And it started with a man nobody was thinking about anymore. Raylan Cade got out of jail on a Tuesday morning. 18 months, reduced to 11 for good behavior. He walked out the gate with a cardboard box of his belongings and no one waiting for him. No wife. She'd filed for divorce 3 months after the conviction, taken the house, taken the kids, taken everything that wasn't nailed down. No badge, no pension, no friends. The department had cut him loose the day the verdict came down, and the town that had once waved at him from their porches now crossed the street when they saw him coming. He was 41 years old and he had nothing. He stood at the bus stop outside the jail for a long time, holding that cardboard box, watching the cars go by. And then he did the only thing he could think of. He bought a ticket to Millbrook, not because he wanted to go back, because he had nowhere else to go. The bus dropped him at the station on Main Street at noon. He walked the 2 miles to his sister's house, the only family who'd still take his calls. She let him sleep on the couch. She didn't ask questions. She made him a sandwich and left him alone, and that was the most kindness he'd been shown in a year. For 2 weeks, Cade didn't leave the house. He sat on the couch, watched TV, stared at the ceiling. His sister's husband, a man named Dale who'd never liked him, made a point of not speaking to him. The neighbors knew, everybody knew. The man who'd thrown Keanu Reeves's badge in the trash was back in town. And then on a Thursday afternoon, Cade did something that surprised even himself. He put on his coat, walked out the door, and started walking. He walked past the hardware store, past the diner, past the church with the cracked bell. People saw him. People stared. A woman pulled her child closer. An old man shook his head. Cade kept walking. He walked all the way out to Route 41 to the gas station. The pump still worked. The trash can was still by the entrance. And taped to the convenience store window still there was the screenshot. Keanu standing up from the hood of that patrol car, shoulders back, jacket straightened, red mark on his cheek, eyes straight ahead. Underneath it, the words someone had written in marker. He didn't belong here. He belonged more than any of them. Cade stood in front of that window for a long time. The kid behind the counter recognized him. His hand went to the phone, then stopped. He just watched. Cade didn't go inside. He turned around and walked back the way he came. But he didn't go home. He went to the county courthouse, the same courthouse where he'd been convicted, and he asked to speak to the new sheriff. The new sheriff was a woman named Dana Whitfield, 45 years old, a former state trooper who'd been brought in under the consent decree to clean the place up. She was the first black sheriff in the history of Millbrook County. She was also the first sheriff who'd ever made the deputies sit through a full day of bias training, the first to fire 2 of Cade's old friends, the first to make the body cameras mandatory and the footage public. Cade sat across from her desk and told her he wanted to help. Whitfield looked at him for a long time. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She said, "Why?" And Cade, for the first time in his life, told the truth. "Because I spent 11 years deciding who mattered and who didn't. And I was wrong about every single one of them." Whitfield studied him. Then she said, "There's a civilian review board now. It meets twice a month. It's made up of people who have been stopped, searched, and harassed by officers like you. They don't trust cops. They don't trust this department, and they have every reason not to." She slid a folder across the desk. "The board needs a liaison, someone who knows the system from the inside, someone who can tell them the truth about how it works." It's volunteer. It pays nothing, and half the board will probably walk out the first time you open your mouth. Cade picked up the folder. His hands were shaking. "I'll take it," he said. And that's how the man who'd thrown Keanu Reeves's badge in the trash ended up sitting in a folding chair in the basement of the county courthouse, twice a month, across from the people he'd spent his career hurting. The first meeting, nobody spoke to him. The second meeting, a woman named Rosa Delgado, whose son had been pulled over 9 times in 3 years for driving while brown, looked at him and said, "Why are you here?" And Cade said, "Because I owe you." Rosa stared at him. Then she said, "You can't owe me. You don't even know me." And Cade said, "That's the point. I decided I knew you without ever meeting you. I decided you didn't matter. I was wrong." The room went quiet. Rosa looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded once and didn't say anything else, but she came back to the next meeting, and the one after that, and the one after that. And then 3 months into his new life, Cade did the thing that nobody expected. He wrote a letter. It took him 4 weeks. He wrote it by hand on paper because he wanted it to hurt, because typing felt like cheating. He wrote about his father and the promise he'd made at the graveside and how that promise had curdled into something ugly. He wrote about the gas station, about the badge, about the sound it made when it hit the trash can. He wrote about the look on Keanu's face when he stood up from the hood of that patrol car. Not anger, not triumph, something quieter. Something that had followed him into his cell every night for 11 months. And at the end of the letter, he wrote the words he'd been carrying since that Thursday afternoon. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it, but I need you to know that I understand now. That badge was never about the badge. It was about me deciding who you were before I ever spoke to you. And I was wrong. I was wrong about you, and I was wrong about every person I ever treated that way. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to say it." He mailed the letter to Keanu's production company in Los Angeles with no return address, not expecting an answer. He didn't get one, not for 6 months. And that's where the story takes its last turn. Because 6 months later in October, exactly 1 year to the day after the gas station, Keanu Reeves came back to Millbrook County. He didn't tell anyone he was coming. He didn't call the sheriff. He didn't call the press. He flew into Nashville, rented the same motorcycle from the same shop, and rode the same 2 hours into the hills. He stopped at the same gas station on Route 41. The pump still worked. The trash can was still by the entrance. The screenshot was still taped to the window. He went inside, bought a bottle of water and a pack of gum, and thanked the kid behind the counter. The kid recognized him. His hands were shaking. Keanu smiled. "It's good to see you," he said. Then he rode out to the cemetery on the hill, the one behind the church with the cracked bell, and he stood at Billy Ray's grave for a long time. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Then he rode into town, and he did something that nobody saw coming. He walked into the county courthouse, into the basement, into the room where the Civilian Review Board was meeting. Rosa Delgado was there. Dana Whitfield was there. And in the folding chair at the end of the table, the one nobody wanted to sit in, was Raylan Cade. Keanu stood in the doorway. The room went silent. Cade looked up. And for the second time in his life, the man who'd thrown a badge in the trash dropped to his knees. Right there in front of the board, in front of the people he'd spent his career hurting, he dropped to his knees and he couldn't speak. Keanu walked over to him. He didn't tell him to get up. He didn't lecture him. He knelt down so they were at eye level, and he said quietly, "I got your letter." Cade couldn't look at him. "I didn't expect you to read it. I read it twice," Keanu said. "And I want you to know something. I've been on my knees before. I've lost everything. I know what it feels like to have nothing, and I know what it takes to get back up." He put his hand on Cade's shoulder. "You're here. That's the part that matters. That's the part most people never do." Cade looked up at him and his eyes were wet. "I threw your badge in the trash," he said. "I slammed your face into a car. I called you a nobody in front of 30 people. Keanu nodded. "You did. And then you spent a year trying to make it right. That doesn't erase what you did. But it tells me who you're trying to be now." He stood up. He looked at the room, at Rosa, at Whitfield, at the board members who were watching with their arms crossed and their jaws tight. "I'm not here to tell you to forgive him," he said. "That's not my call. That's yours. I'm here to tell you that I've seen a lot of men in my life. And most of them, when they're caught, they run. They hide. They blame everyone else. This man didn't do any of that. He came back. He sat in this room, he listened. That's more than most people ever do. He turned back to Cade. "Get up," he said. Cade got up. Keanu held out his hand. Cade looked at it like it was a foreign object. Then he took it. And Keanu shook his hand once firmly, the way you shake the hand of a man you're choosing to believe in. "Now," Keanu said, "I hear this board needs funding for a youth program, something to keep kids out of the back seats of patrol cars." Whitfield blinked. "We've been trying to get that funded for a year." Keanu pulled a check out of his jacket. He'd written it before he left Lowe's Angels. "Consider it done," he said. He handed it to Whitfield. She looked at the number on the check and her mouth fell open. It was enough to fund the program for 10 years. Keanu turned to leave. At the door, he stopped. He looked back at Cade, still standing in the middle of the room, still looking like a man who'd been struck by lightning. "One more thing," Keanu said. "That badge you threw in the trash, I kept it. It's in a glass case on my desk, not as a trophy, as a reminder," he paused, "of what happened when I had a name, and what happens to the people who don't." He walked out. The room was silent for a long time after he left. Rosa Delgado was the first to speak. She looked at Cade and her voice was hard, but it wasn't cruel. "He's a better man than you deserve," she said. "I know," Cade said, "I know." The youth program opened the following spring. They named it after Billy Ray. It's still running today. And the Civilian Review Board, the one that started in a basement with folding chairs and nobody speaking to each other, is still meeting. Rosa Delgado is the chair now. And sitting in the liaison seat, the one nobody wanted, is a man named Raylan Cade, who shows up every single month, who listens, who takes notes, who answers every question honestly, even the ones that make him wince. He's been doing it for years now. He'll probably do it for the rest of his life, because he learned the only lesson that matters the hard way in front of the whole world. You never know who's standing in front of you, and the people you decide don't matter. They always matter. They always did. The gas station on Route 41 is still there. The pumps still work. The trash can is still by the entrance. And the screenshot is still taped to the window, faded now, curling at the edges, but nobody has ever taken it down. Because it's not a picture of a movie star anymore. It's a picture of a man who stood up. And underneath it, in marker that's still legible after all these years, the words that became the town's unofficial motto. He didn't belong here. He belonged more than any of them. This story is fiction, but the dynamic at its center, a person treated as less than, as suspicious, as worthless simply because of the way they look, is documented in case after case, department after department, coast to coast. The names change. The roads change. The outcome almost never does. The only thing fictional here is the badge. The feeling is real for millions of people every single day. So here's my question, and I genuinely want to hear your answer in the comments. If that man at the gas station hadn't been Keanu Reeves, if he'd just been a trucker, a teacher, a nurse, a dad riding home to his kids, do you think this story would have ended the same way? Drop your answer below. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if this is your first time here, hit subscribe because we tell the stories that need telling. Yeah, so the real lesson here, respect costs you nothing. But disrespect, that bill always comes due. You never, and I mean never, know who's standing in front of you. Treat people like people, period. That's it. That's the whole thing.